Okay, we'll go ahead and call our meeting back to order. Ms. Clemens, would you read us out of close, please?
I move that the Roanoke County School Board come out of closed session for the following: to discuss ongoing personnel matters under investigation pursuant to the personnel exemption at 2.2-3711A1 of the Code of Virginia, and to discuss the investigation of a student matter pursuant to the scholastic record exemption at 2.2-3711A2 of the Code of Virginia, for consultation with legal counsel and briefings by staff members pertaining to actual or probable litigation and consultation with legal counsel regarding specific legal matters requiring the provision of legal advice by such counsel pursuant to 2.2-3711A7 of the Code of Virginia. I move to certify that to the best of each member's knowledge, only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements under this chapter, and only such public business matters as were identified in the motion by which the closed meeting was convened, were heard, discussed, or considered in the meeting by the school board.
Second.
Madam Clerk?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am. Item 2.03, action from closed.
I would like to make a motion to allow students 2024, 2025, numbers 5 through 8 to be approved for religious exemption from Roanoke County Public Schools.
Second.
Madam Clerk?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am. Item 3.01, project updates. Mr. Todd Kegels.
We're going to start this evening with updates on our major construction projects, the 3 schools, the new construction at the CTE Center, and the 2 elementary schools that are being renovated. We have with us this evening Jason Pack, Regional Director for Skanska, and Kamal Khalil and Wes Mitchell, who are our program managers for the elementary schools and for the CTE Center, respectively. Gentlemen?
Sure. You can drive, Todd. So on the agenda tonight is we'll discuss the past and current activities at all the sites, and then I'll go through some project photos as well. So at the CTE facility, they've set up erosion and sediment control measures, cleared and grubbed some trees and shrubs, performed excavation and backfilling, especially in the area where the groundbreaking took place. Installation of an 8-inch water line and backfilling of that line. Also installation of fire hydrant and valves. They've prepped the trailer area, flushed the water line and ran a back T-test, received stormwater structures and construction trailers, and then drilled for and began blasting activities. A little later on in the presentation, I've got a video of one of those blasts that we did. And then repair and restoration of diversion dikes and other erosion and sediment control measures. After any kind of rain or storm event or anything like that, that's something that they're required to do. And then began work on the stormwater pond. Outside of that, the heavy rainfall that we've had has kind of hampered some activities on site. It's pretty muddy out there. But outside of the construction activities as well, we're also evaluating the CTE equipment and furniture through some outside vendors as well. So past and current activities at the 2 elementary schools, and I grouped these together because the activities thus far have been so similar in nature. As we move along, if they start to deviate a little bit, I'll probably separate those out. But for now, at both sites, setup and installation of trailers, installation of the trailer skirting, also temporary panels for power, decks, stairs, and ramps for the trailers, and then also site fencing around the site. You probably saw that on the way in here today at Glen Cove. They've also been doing some clearing and grubbing of trees and shrubs, installation of the silt fence, and then trenching and installation of the conduit under asphalt, and then pulling wire for the temporary panel to the trailers, as well as low voltage cable. They've also constructed some wood benches for the workers to sit on and take their breaks and things like that. On many days on these sites, the electrical crews and fencing crews still work through the rain, so they were still pretty productive. And then we are still evaluating the furniture contracts on these two buildings as well. So for our project photos, there on the left, you can see some site grading and some compaction there in the background. On the right is the 8-inch water line. On the left here, we have the stormwater pond and then some of the stormwater structures that arrived on site. And then we've got this really cool photo of the blasting drillers there. They drill into the ground so that they can set the explosives. And then on the right, you can kind of see the aftermath of a blast. And the next slide should be a blast. Pretty cool. Actually, that one, one of the branch guys asked if he could push the thing, so they let him push it. So. They may let you. Yeah.
Thinking about Bugs Bunny.
Right.
The runner repeat.
So at W.E. Cundiff, there's the photo of the trailer set. They had skirting on most of them at that point. The one still needed some skirting on it. Over on the right is the ramp to the trailers.
They probably look familiar. It's the same ones we've had forever, for Cave Spring, then Bird, and now the elementary schools.
And then here we have a photo on the left of the fence installation and that temporary panel that I referred to before. And then at Glen Cove, there's the trailers there. We've got a temporary panel on the right. And then some tree removal on the left there, and then the silt fence over in the right photo. That's pretty much all we had for you. I did want to note that all of our contact information is there. Like Todd indicated, Kamal is working in between the two elementary schools. Wes is on the CTE site. So if you guys ever want to come out there, you want a tour or anything like that, please reach out to these guys directly or through Todd, and we can get you the gear that you need to take a tour out there if you want.
And before we turn them loose, do we have any questions? It is part of their contract to keep the board updated on construction progress, so we'll have them either monthly or every other month, just depending on how much there is to report. But if you have any questions now, otherwise we're going to let them go so they don't have to sit through the rest of the meeting.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question. With the port closings that we're experiencing right now, do you have any concerns?
You're not the first person that's asked me that on other projects as well. It could be. It just depends on how long that lasts. Right now, we don't have a really good indication as to the severity of how that's going to affect anything right now. But it's certainly
Okay.
with what we have going on right now at CTE. It's mainly earth moving. The other stuff at the elementary schools, I don't think it's going to be affected right away.
It depends on.
Yeah, it really does.
Okay. Well, I know you can't find paper towels right now. Or toilet paper. Told you. I told you. Yeah. All right. I was just curious. I hope it doesn't come to be a factor, but I know it's something that everybody's concerned about, so.
Yeah.
They'll have a better idea once they start buying it out of where we're at.
Yeah, right now they are in the process of buying out the contracts with their subcontractors and things of that nature, so they'll get more of that info directly from their subcontractors.
Okay.
As they move through that process.
All right. Thank you.
Good question.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Appreciate
Sure.
it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Not necessarily a project per se, but nonetheless falls under operations. I just wanted to discuss our need for additional bus drivers and kind of give you some ideas on what we've done to try to mitigate this. Currently, we have 6 driver positions that are open. Those are routes that are assigned that don't have a full-time driver assigned to them. So those are being covered by mechanics and supervisors right now who drive pretty much every day to keep all of our routes going and get all the kids to school. In addition to those 6 open positions, we have another 10 routes that we've temporarily at least eliminated so that we save the driver positions. So you really need 6 drivers plus 10 drivers there to have all of our routes running that we would have in an ideal staffing situation. And then, just like operating a school where you need substitute teachers, you need substitute bus drivers, so we really could use another 10 drivers in addition to those 16 to be, considered at an ideal staffing level. So, so far this year, during the summer, we hired and trained 3 new drivers. They're already included in those numbers up above, so those open 6 and 10, those 3 are already included in that. We do have 3 drivers in training right now, and we have just a training class that's getting ready to start where there's another 3 enrolled. So if everybody stays in the program and goes on to become a full-time bus driver, we will have added 9 drivers this school year. But even with that, we still need, the numbers above. So I think Dr. Soltis is going to address what we've done and what we would like to do.
Yeah, so currently, we all met and we talked about some different strategies to try to attract and retain drivers. Some of the things we're already doing is offering full-time benefits and health, dental, and vision. We've offered up to $1,500 signing bonuses, offered $500 for referral bonuses. Dr. Nicely, I don't even know if this is up here yet, but Dr. Nicely did a WDBJ 7 story. I actually got a couple of texts from that. Facebook job postings, ads, advertising in school newsletters, media outreach would be the news story, and refreshed and updated the Why I Drive video series on Facebook. And you're good. He said I'd read my mind on the switch, sorry. But basically what we're looking at proposing to do is to raise the minimum pay rate from $20.59 up to $25.42. Dr. Nicely, you can jump in here if you want, but I believe we've gotten the green light that it is something that we can afford to do. That would be really close to what the city pays. And I mean, 8 cents an hour away from what the city does. So you can see in the right corner the hourly rates of the different divisions, how many hours a day, and what the how many contracted days there are. Different divisions travel different amounts, like Salem's only 14 square miles long, so that could be attractive to some people even though their pay is way less. So there's different variables involved in who you're going to attract. The financial implications would be, we're going to guarantee a minimum of 5 hours a day on a 188-day contract. The maximum pay would not change. So the financial implications that were provided to us is $245,549.99. That includes FICA. And that's just because we'd start this on December 1st, correct, Susan? And then for 25-26, it changes to $412,173.21, including FICA, because you'd be doing it over a longer period of time, obviously.
Can I say one more thing about that? And Susan, just nod or shake your head vigorously, whichever the way it goes. But normally, what we'd be thinking about is, okay, maybe we can, because of personnel lapse and different factors, maybe we could say we could afford that $245,000 for this year. But what about budgeting for next year? But we feel like due to some other savings that Susan has built in and so forth, that we're pretty confident that we can actually build that in to next year's budget, the 412, without having to rely on increased revenue because of other savings and accounting things that Susan's looking at. Is that fair? Okay. So we feel like it's there's not much of a risk here to go that route. My desire is to not let that minimum hourly rate, because that's what people pay attention to, get in the way. So if somebody says, well, gosh, I'm going to go over here and work in the city because I get $25 an hour, because Roanoke County is only paying $20, I'd like to take that off the table to at least not make that a factor. So that's what we're kind of recommending.
How is the staff morale now? I know that they're squeezed because we're shorthanded, but
It's tough, stuff on our, I know we get reports from, and they're all troopers. I'm talking about transportation staff up in Salem. The mechanics have to drive. One of the reasons we would like to be in a situation where Kathy and Jerry aren't having to drive every day is because, situations arise. With some situation with a bus. Well, they're not. They're all driving, so we can't get them until after the fact. I mean, obviously for all those reasons, and plus with our mechanics as well, correct me if I'm wrong, Todd, I mean,
Absolutely.
we'd like for them to spend more time on the mechanic, and they would too. That's what they were hired to do, is the mechanics, you know,
Well, have we
bus
polled
maintenance.
our current drivers just to kind of see, you know, what their opinions are on? I mean, I just want to make sure our retention levels are good too. I don't want to keep, you know, losing people. And
Absolutely.
I understand a lot of people age out and they retire, or you know, and I think a lot of people, probably most people that drive, are retired. From some sort
That's
of-
the common thing, right? I mean, we started offering benefits thinking that would help attract some people who didn't necessarily have to be retired or and so forth. That's had some, I think, some effect, but not as much as you necessarily would think. But and that's one thing we try to do is, you know, when we're out to the schools in the afternoons before the kids dismiss, I mean, we try to go around and talk to the drivers and so forth. I've actually had drivers reach out and say how much they appreciate just being listened to.
Right.
You go around and thank them, right? And then sometimes they'll have suggestions for you, that kind of thing. We always try to listen and follow up. So we got a good group.
So we'd be looking at about a $5 an hour adjustment, which I often have said over the years, to me, the bus drivers are the second most important person in this organization, because when you look at what they're tasked with doing and getting a child to and from school safely, and we're trying to get class sizes down around 20, and some of them are transporting 50 or 60 kids at a time. It's a pretty important job, and you know, one of the most precious cargo that any of these buses carry are our children, but also, in my case, grandchildren. And certainly you hate to see our costs go up in that way, but for a bus driver, for me, I'm okay with it. I think it's necessary. It's a necessary, I don't even call it a necessary evil. I think it's a necessary positive, because, you know, we've got some wonderful bus drivers, and, you know, we don't hear about, you know, a lot of accidents and situations, you know, I mean, that happens. I mean, I'm not knocking it, but we have a wonderful group of drivers, and I think if you took our accident rates over the last 5 or 6 years, it's minuscule compared to probably some of the things we've heard in other areas. So anyway, I'm okay with it. I know it's easy to say that when you're increasing your costs. It's not easy to say that when you're increasing your costs by $250,000 this year and $400,000 next year, but I do believe that they are the second most important people in this school business.
Let me just say two things. One, you're absolutely right. I mean, it's a tough job. I mean, it's a tough job. And secondly, there's really, I mean, we've been part of conversations with people all over the state and all over the country about this particular issue. It's a common thing. There's no one magic answer to solving the problem. There's all kinds of variables at play. Our thing is, let's don't let the starting pay be one of those. Let's take that off the table if we can, to the extent we can.
Do the neighboring jurisdictions where we're seeing those, do they offer benefits? Do we know?
I know Salem.
Yeah, I know Salem does, and
Not sure about
Salem's
Salem.
drivers get VRS. Roanoke City's contracted to a third party, so I can't speak to that, and I can find out for you.
And I think we heard about, if I'm correct, allegedly, you know, the start of this year was a disaster with contracted labor. So I don't know, they've made some switches and done some.
Apparently, they've had to do staggered times for different
Yeah,
schools, and
And they didn't have buses.
Right, so, you
And we're
know,
way ahead of the game.
yeah. And
Yeah, and I think this is important also from the perspective of retention. Because as these folks age up, anything we can do to keep them on staff, driving our kids, these experienced drivers, it's important to make them happy. So I'm good with it.
And Todd, correct me if I'm wrong, we thought we were struggling to get a mechanic at one time because they didn't really want to have to drive.
Right. There's a
Oh,
rare
very good.
mechanic who also will, drive a public school bus. So those folks are difficult to find. It would be much easier if we were only looking for a mechanic. And I will just say, publicly, we transport every kid in Roanoke County who wants to ride the bus every single day with the staff we have. So they're doing a remarkable job. We're just not at ideal staffing levels and can't do everything we would like to do if we had the personnel to do it. So, kudos to our transportation folks. And if there's anybody watching who's interested in being a bus driver, you can go to the Roanoke County website. You type jobs, you'll find the job listing, type bus, and you'll find the bus driver listing, and you can apply right there online.
And how long does it take to get your CDL?
Well, we provide the training. It's a several-week process, but
bring
it's
up the
free.
negative.
We provide
Well, it's
all
all
the
right.
training, and that's something that, if you end up leaving the county several years down the road, you can take that certification with you and use it in other places. And there's paid training. We pay, while you're doing your training. So you really couldn't have a better, more supportive situation for being a bus driver.
$25 an hour is a good, I think it's a good pay.
Yes, sir.
Might have your first guy right here.
Well,
Service in the
Oh,
small. You know the
I
veterinarian, don't
appreciate
you?
them, and they are
You know the
amazing.
veterinarian.
I'm not sure I
you
could,
could do it.
I
know
can't.
you could do it.
I think you'd be an ideal.
I don't think I can deal with my grandkids
I'll do it. I'll do it
I
with
would-
you if you want to do it.
on a bus.
we would love to have you, Mr. Greenway. If you
I'm telling you, it's an amazing job. It's a hard job.
really
It's
is.
not. Yeah, well, I won't be applying, I can tell you.
They do a great job, though. You're right.
They do.
If there are no objections, we'd love to put that on consent agenda for the next meeting.
I think it sounds
It's fine
good.
with me.
Okay, and now on to our actual project updates. We have just a few this evening. Over at Williamburg Middle School, this is a $250,000 project to replace the bleachers out there in the main gym. They were actually our oldest set in the county. They were original to the building, and I can tell you, having been principal there, that it has been a long time since those have worked reliably, and it actually gotten to the point where they were a safety hazard in some areas. We kept them repaired, of course, but those things would come up. So those are being replaced. They've already been delivered. They've already started construction on there, and it should be done by the 10th. So middle of next week, we should be, ready. If you'd like to go out there and take a look at them and see what we've done. So the school will be real happy to get their gym back once we're done with the construction out there. If you'll recall, the board approved the parking lot extension primarily to provide safer bus access to the A-Step program in the back there so that the buses can loop around the building. We also pick up some much-needed parking spaces here due to the size of the land disturbance. We did have to employ an engineer for that to do the designs. We get approved by the county before we can start paving, so the topographic survey has been done, the preliminary site design has been completed, and over the next 2 or 3 weeks, the final site development plan will be finalized, and then that'll go to Roanoke County for approval. We're still hoping to get that done this fall. If we miss the paving window, that could go to the spring, but it is our goal still to get that one done this fall. Over at Burlington, at the last board meeting, last public meeting, just a couple of weeks ago, the board approved money to repave the play area and the track out there. We were actually ready to go the next day, had been our plan. We had already done all the procurement stuff and had the contracts in place and just had to wait on final approval from the board before we could start. So we were ready to go the next day, but it rained the next day, and we've not had a day where the ground was dry enough to get the equipment back there since then. So there's equipment already on site. The plan right now is just to wait until Monday and then do it all next week and be finished by the end of the week if the weather cooperates and the ground is dry out there. Over at Glenver, we did a few small projects. They actually requested this storage shed to move some propane equipment and things out of the school. Our special projects team built that for them, and that's actually already finished. They did a great job. Also at Glenver High School, it's hard to tell from these pictures. So my guys are great at construction. They're not necessarily great photographers, but this is the picture they took. So this structure sets up on top of the press box there at Glenver, and it was an existing structure that they had asked for it to be repaired. But when we got up there and started to repair it, we discovered, the wood was really rotten, and it had gotten to the point where you could actually fall through there if you leaned on the wrong part of it and that kind of thing. And of course, you're up on top of the press box, on top of the stadium, so it's very high, and that had gotten dangerous. So they built a complete new structure for them. It's actually sitting on the ground right now. It's just about finished. They're going to lift it up and set it up on top of that press box with a crane, probably middle of next week. So our goal is by the end of next week to be finished. We are aware they have homecoming on the 11th, and we want to beat that date and have it ready for them by then. But it looks fantastic. It's green, of course. It's Glenver's colors, and it looks fantastic.
Just real quick, so tomorrow's the 4th, so next week is the 11th.
Yeah.
Okay.
Our goal is to be done by then. They're going to pop it up there. It's all done on the ground. They just set it up and they attach it, and then it's basically finished. So that's our goal. Okay, so this is a new project we'd like to discuss. This is not one that's currently in progress. So Glenver Middle School has the softball field here that this is happening a couple places in the county. These weren't ever intended to be game fields. They were, basically PE fields that the schools decided, we could play our games here if we just had, maybe a rack of bleachers and some benches and whatever. So that's what Glenver Middle School has done with this field, and they play their games there. Did the same thing over at Cave Spring Middle. They kind of built their own little softball field there. It's been done many other places in the county over the years. The problem with it, even though they've invested a lot of time and some money in it, you can see over here, I can't zoom that in because of my pointer. Well, maybe you can see in the picture right there, they don't actually have grass in the outfield. That's all weeds. So as soon as the frost hit, all of that's going to be dead. Even if it weren't, it obviously doesn't provide a surface that you can really play softball on in terms of the ball rolling across it and that kind of thing. You have mud, you have big gaps where there's no vegetation whatsoever. That's because they don't have irrigation, and so in the summer when the heat hits, any grass that's out there just dies out. Almost all of our game fields are irrigated. That's why most of our game fields look really good. Is because they have irrigation systems. So we would propose that Glenver Middle School needs to have an irrigation system installed on the softball field. The cost of that, depending on how quickly we want to do it, is between $15,000 and $20,000. We actually already have bids on that and have some contractors lined up. It's just a matter of getting funding approved for that.
I will say this is a field that's looked rough for a very long time. I mean, Jamie can probably attest to
I
that.
can attest to that. I had to hammer PVC pipes down in the ground to be able to hold a fence up for a home run fence because it's so hard.
And I've definitely had parents reach out to me every year about the condition of it. And I know the coaches have tried their best to kind of maintain it, but like you said, without water, it's almost impossible to.
It is impossible. Without irrigation, there's nothing you can do with the outfield.
And just for some historical, when I was in high school, the varsity field was down there after they moved it from where the library is now. That's where the field used to be. But the infield was down near the elementary school, and you hit it back towards the middle school. So that's kind of been a rigged field for a long time, and they've moved around some things. But it's been that way for a long time.
Who currently maintains it?
Mr. Blankenship.
We actually mow it for them. Operations mows it for them. They take care of dragging the infield and that sort of thing. We've provided some help because they're one of the only schools that has to kind of maintain their own game field like that. We provided some help to get them some equipment to drag the infield and that kind of thing. We had the infield sprayed for weeds and that kind of thing. So we try to provide assistance for them, but again, without the irrigation, there's just nothing you can do in the outfield.
This isn't the varsity field, this is another.
Middle
No, it's
Just the middle school.
Gotcha.
Which I spoke with the assistant principal who serves as the athletic director in regards to possibly using Greenhill Park. It's not what the kids want, but obviously we could do that. However, transportation is always an issue because we have to wait until a bus driver goes out, makes their route, and then comes back to pick the kids up. And I experienced that when I was there coaching middle school baseball years ago, that you would get there after the visiting team got there. So it was kind of a pain. And then for practices and stuff like that, it was always a pain because you had to wait for the bus driver. So you're kind of out in the parking lot throwing the ball. But this field's always in bad shape. I mean, I agree that something needs to be done.
Also makes sense to keep our kids on our campus when we can.
Exactly. I mean, it's a good point for safety.
Yeah,
And
there
it's
were some safety concerns with going to the park, even in terms of storm shelters and things like that when they're off campus.
And I mean, the kids are proud of being at Glenver. I think that's a lot of where the athletic director's coming from too. I mean, it's a home field for them.
Okay.
We also had a request division-wide for the elementary schools to receive $2,500 to, that's each elementary school library, to receive $2,500 for improvements to the media center. The total of that's $40,000. That's 2,500 times 16. And again, we were requested to propose that. So, if you have any questions about that?
I do know visiting libraries around, you can tell that a lot of the furniture and stuff they have could definitely use a little boost in all of the schools.
And that would be similar to what we did a couple of years ago with, I think it was $50,000 each school got for athletic field improvements, athletic facility improvements, where the schools decided how to spend it. It would be the same. I assume, of course, that's up to the board, but I assume it would be up to the librarians to decide, and the principals, of course, together to decide how they wanted to spend that money.
That would be the key in my mind, is to let them decide what's best for them to, some may want some furniture, some may want another computer or whiteboard or whatever to make it more of a media space.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I think leaving it open, like you said, principal and librarian make that decision.
Yeah.
Okay, so that brings us to just a list of things that we have discussed. So all of these things, with the exception of the one at the very bottom, and I'll talk about that just briefly, have been discussed. These are things that are unfunded. I just kind of wanted to give a review of things that have been proposed. The maintenance department wants to have those plans digitized. Recall that we're losing those due to their age and condition. Bonsack Elementary School would like to have some carpet replaced out there. There's a lot of carpet out there. That one's about $50,000. Herman L. Horn Elementary has a smaller area of carpet they'd like to replace. That's $20,000. Special Ed had asked for a couple of minivans for their non-CDL drivers, primarily, I believe, for their preschool program. That's about $90,000 for 2 vans. Northside High School wants to change some science classrooms into family and consumer sciences and nutrition classrooms. That's about $50,000 due to plumbing and mechanical changes. Hidden Valley Middle School, if we wanted to try to sort of brighten that up and do a very minor remodeling on the inside, we're looking at about $275,000 to do the all of the public spaces. That's all of the hallways, not inside the classrooms, but everything pretty much outside the classrooms. New ceilings, lights, countertops, sinks, that sort of thing. It's about $275,000. Over at Northside Middle School, they have an old locker room over there they'd like to convert to a wrestling room. That's $50,000. Glenver Middle School, we just talked about the irrigation on the softball field. The elementary media centers, we just talked about the allotment for those. And over at Clearbrook, you haven't heard about this one yet. They've asked us to look at taking some lobby space, essentially lobby and hallway space, and converting it into what I would just call flex rooms. I mean, it's areas to use as offices for itinerant folks, areas to do PTOT, that kind of thing. They just need spaces for folks to come in and work with kids. Initially, we thought we could just go out there and build walls for them like we've done in some other schools, and that our special projects teams, the guys that did the sheds and some of the other projects that are going on there, would just come out and build the walls that they had requested and do this for them. Wouldn't require any additional funding from the board. But upon further investigation, we're probably talking about having to hire an engineer because of changes to the sprinkler system and the HVAC system that would be required. And then approvals from the county that would have to go along with that, because you're taking some hallway space where you have some egress issues, and all that would have to be analyzed. So the cost for that project would probably run in the $100,000 range. So that's just to kind of put that on your plate and have sort of food for thought for the future. Those are the things that are have been requested or proposed. Anybody have any questions about any of those?
So when do decisions have to be made regarding those projects?
Well, I don't think anything is necessarily time sensitive. I will say on the irrigation system, we would need to do that now, or else you get into winter and then you have to wait till spring, and then they're playing in the spring, and then you're trying to put it in the summer, and you're tearing up the field in the heat. So that one, timing wise, would kind of need to be done now, or wait until after softball season is over. Everything else, I'm just making sure this is accurate before I say it. There's not really a time schedule for anything else there. And these are things, some of these things are things that, we've brought up through operations, I think 2 of them. And then the others are things that either board members have brought up or the schools themselves have requested.
Can I ask a question about the Clearbrook piece?
Yes, sir.
So I know when it was first mentioned, I mean, not denying maybe some need for some extra little rooms and so forth, but I am concerned, I have a question about the lobby space and just the aesthetics and all that. I mean, beyond sprinklers. So I would assume that if we were able to do that, that would be taken into consideration.
I think you know me well enough to know that I'm going to pay attention to
It's
how
just
it
a
looks.
concern. I mean,
Yeah, it was a concern of mine also when it was brought up. We would do our best to make it aesthetically pleasing, but it is added on, and it is, kind of in a hallway there. That doesn't mean we couldn't, they have all that brick on the interior and that sort of thing now, so it looks really good. We can do that kind of thing to tie it in and make it look probably not original, but to tie it in aesthetically. So I do think that's a concern. It's something we would certainly pay attention to as we went. And as one of the benefits of hiring an engineer and an architect is that they would take that into consideration with us and make sure we do it right.
And Todd, I think we talked about the Hidden Valley Middle School. When is it on our list for our capital improvements? It's kind of far down.
It was more than. I wish I had brought that with me now that you asked that. I actually have it on my
I
office.
know Northside Middle, I think, is the next one. I know Burlington's on there, Glenver Elementary.
It's like
Bed
third or so,
Forest.
isn't it?
It's
Far down.
It's way down.
It's way
We're
down,
looking
I
at-
think. I mean, it's not.
Not
gonna-
before
I
I
may not be
retire.
last, but it's on down there.
I think Susan's trying to look it up.
We won't allow you to retire. You can stay around a while.
With the LED lights, would that be a cost savings for us to install?
There'll be
LED?
some electricity savings. Mainly, they just look a lot better, but certainly they're more energy efficient. It would be similar to what we did actually in here. We put up new ceiling and new LED lights, and you see the difference it's made in sort of modernizing this space. It would be the same thing in the hallways there.
Okay, and I think you had told me some of the ceiling tiles are kind of decrepit and old and dirty, and we can't even replace them
That's
anymore.
right. Those are the ones that don't have the exposed grid, so you can't get the small ones. Like we have to paint them when they get water stained and that kind of thing. We just have to paint them right now rather than replace them. If you do replace them, you have to replace them with something that doesn't look anything like the ones that are there. So
It's like a
that's kind of the
hodgepodge.
situation it's
You
in.
can't do
Yeah.
it. Okay.
I know this is not on the list, but while we're talking about Clearbrook, were you going to say anything about just what we're going to do as far as mitigating that water issue?
Well, I know everybody's aware that we had to close school out there on Monday and Tuesday because of the flood in the basement. So what happened was that there was a power failure. That took out the sump pumps that are in the basement there. Clearbrook is, the groundwater level there is kind of very close to where the foundation is anyway. And any rise in the groundwater, there's old coal chutes in the basement. Water just pours in there. It comes up out of the floor. It's just not a good situation from a drainage perspective. But there's sump pumps in there that can generally handle the water that come in there. But when power goes out, of course, like typically happens in a storm, sump pumps go down and then the water comes up, and then when the water does come up, there's electrical equipment in the basement, so it floods the electrical equipment, and even when the power comes back on, the pumps are still down because power's off to the whole school because of the water in the basement. So we are going to we're going to fund all this through the capital maintenance plan, so it won't require money from the board, but we're going to install 2 higher flow sump pumps and a separate natural gas powered generator that'll just run the panel that powers the 2 sump pumps, so that if the power does go down, the pumps will stay up and running and should be able to keep up with any water that comes in and should prevent this from happening again. We also have looked into some cellular flood alarms, so that you can put it in there, water gets up a couple of feet, and then you can get notified that this is going on, and then we can get pumps out there. Even if they're, for whatever reason, the internal pumps have failed, we can get our separate pumps out there, powered with our generators, and pump it out before it gets up and floods the electrical. That's what the issue was here. It wasn't really the water in the basement as much as it was electricity was off to the school because everything had been flooded down there.
So, Mr. Greenway, your question on the CIP. So, the next project is Northside Middle, and then Glenville Elementary, and then Hidden Valley Middle follows that.
Third, did you say Northside?
Northside, Glenville
Yeah.
Elementary, and then Hidden Valley Middle, and then circling back around to Burlington, and then Penn Forest.
Yep.
What year was Northside Middle? 30, 32? 2030.
We're good, I think.
That's all I have.
Well, I guess the question is,
Do we want to do the irrigation? Is the only time since
right, because all these would be funded out of Minor Capital.
Yes, sir.
And so in order to do that, y'all would have to approve and say, okay, go ahead and tell Mr. Gagos to move forward with, Project X or Y, or whichever ones you want to do.
Well, where's the minor capital? Where's the money? I mean, have you got the forms? Has Susan got us? Is that in our?
What's the balance on Minor Capital right now?
I mean, do we?
64?
Could you send that to us? I mean, I know it's in the monthly meetings.
This year.
When's the year end next month?
Yeah, 64,000 left for this year, and
Till
then
January?
once you get the year-end money in November, December, whenever that happens, it'll be replenished.
I was going to say.
Yeah.
It never took that long, but
Todd, I know at one point you mentioned you felt like the digitizing those and the schematics was pretty important. Is that contract, is there a time frame on that?
No, there's no no time frame on it other than obviously that stuff just continues to deteriorate, and as it's used, that old paper you're flipping back and forth from, and of course it's coming apart. But there's nothing that doing it now or doing it 3 or 4 months from now, that's not gonna make any difference.
Well, and year end will come in December, so that's when we'll have a lot more money.
Can you remind us on that, Susan? So once we get the year-end and then Minor Capital gets replenished, that takes place. When will it actually be replenished?
In December.
In December.
I'm going to talk about that when I
Yeah, but
present.
just while we're talking about it.
How many home games does middle school softball play? Middle
Probably
school team
6.
play?
They typically would have 12 to 14 game seasons, so 6 or 7. Half of those would be at home, so 6 or 7, and they practice on that field daily. Also, it's not just their home games.
Yeah, I'm fine with doing it, Brent. I think it's long term. It makes the most amount of sense. I prefer to keep our kids on campus for safety,
absolutely.
and it sounds like this field has quite the history, according to Dr. Solstice. So,
All right. Well, it looks like we can go ahead and move forward with that one, and then we'll take a look at the others in December when we get our year in.
Okay.
And so we would add that to the consent agenda if that's acceptable to the board, sir. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Todd.
yes, thank you, Todd.
You're doing an awesome job. Your
Yeah,
guys do a great
I
job.
just want to
too.
say the same
Appreciate
thing.
The building
So
out of Denver was
organized.
Job
unreal.
security,
I tell you, the guys, they do such good work. All right, 3.02, recommended policy changes, Dr. Jamie Soltis.
I don't have a presentation for the policies, so sorry. Basically, these are all HR policies that when HR was reviewing it, and we reminded everybody that they should at least review the policies every 5 years. He had a group of, I can't remember exactly how many, 12 or 13 policies that he wanted to at least review. Additionally, there are some, when we made that change to PTO, keep finding they're all local policies that we have that needed to be adjusted. And then when he was reviewing the majority for the 5-year review, there were some grammatical things or maybe a couple date changes that didn't reflect our current practice. So for example, 5.08 and 5.09, we used to have April 15th as the deadline for secondary department heads and elementary coordinating teachers to apply for those jobs. We've been doing it to April 1st, so we just changed the date in the policy. Most of the policies, like I said, are just grammatical or change sick days to PTO. Nothing. One had like the Fair Labor Standards Act. It had the old last time it was implemented or reviewed date to the new date. Other than that, nothing really substantial. Other than our 5.53, which was the retirement savings program, we still had in that policy 401A match plan, and it had in there that people were grandfathered in as of July 1, 2012. Well, none of those people are still there. We don't have a 401A match plan anymore.
Their grandfather.
Yeah, they're grandfathered. So, and that's basically it. I mean, if you have any specific questions about any of the policies, the majority of them we had Roanoke County Schools, and like they wanted to put Roanoke County Public Schools because that's the true name. So that's about it. So, and Mr. Bradshaw asked that we do those now instead of waiting until the others, just giving you a little bit of a time instead of massive whenever we get the new updates. So I make a motion that we put that on consent, or I don't make a motion, I'd recommend that we would put that on consent agenda. Sorry.
Yeah, that works for us. Yeah.
I wonder who voted him in.
Yeah. I'm adjunct. Sorry.
All right. 3.03, review of final VDOE guidance on cell phone policy.
All right. So as you guys know, the VDOE was directed to, sorry, I'm getting all these messages on my computer. The VDOE issued its final guidance on cell phone policies. So the background is the Governor Youngkin, issued Executive Order 33, which required trying to establish a cell phone free education. He outlined various steps for various departments at the state level to do some research, put out some draft guidance, and also get feedback from other types of stakeholders before putting that draft guidance out. So they had 9 public listening sessions. This is all before they even put out the draft guidance, by the way. 600 attendees, 11 additional stakeholder groups, and over 1,500 online comments submitted. From all that, 77% were in strong favor of a cell phone free during instructional time. So once they put out their guidance, they left it open for feedback until September 15th. They got nearly 6,000 public comments and feedback during engagements, including 21 stakeholder convenings and public Commonwealth conversations with over 1,160 Virginians. Also, George Mason University put out a poll that showed 69% of Virginia parents of school-age children supported a cell phone-free education, including lunch and class breaks. All right, so the 5 key takeaways from the stakeholder feedback was they asked to remove cell phones and personal electronic communication devices from our children's public schools, quote unquote, bell to bell, during the school day at all levels, elementary, middle, and high. Also, they want to make sure the students with documented medical issues that use cell phones to monitor their conditions have access to them when they need it. They also believe that it was important that parents should be able to know and receive information about a child's well-being in class in cases of school-based and family-based emergencies, because obviously right now a lot of people are communicating through their cell phones. They do not want classroom teachers to be the ones that are constantly having to police this. They want to make sure teachers have the support and are not looked to be the sole enforcers of the policy. And then they want to make sure that we're educating parents of the negative impacts of cell phones through using adults in the community, such as pastors, coaches, etc., to basically keep informing people so they have a better understanding of what the research is saying. They also, and I kind of touched this earlier, but they had 3 common concerns that came out of the feedback, and that was parents of students that have medical needs that use their phones for like insulin or anything like that, that they would have some exemptions. The students wanted to use their phones during lunch. That they got that about a bunch of feedback from that from the students, but then they studied the research that showed students receive more than 200 notifications on their smartphones, and 2/3 of students report being distracted by digital devices. And then the other concern was, like I said, parents, when it's a family or school emergency, having some way of getting in contact and communicating with their student or an adult at the school to help facilitate that. So some important definitions that were in the guidelines is bell to bell does include lunch and times in between class periods. The cell phone free education, they basically are saying either the elimination or restriction of cell phones and other personal communication devices in public schools. It defines what a cell phone is. It's one for making calls, but it does also include flip phones. It also includes the iWatches or the Apple Watch and those types of things. And it also says, and any future personal device that may be developed. So then it does define personal electronic communication device, and this is important because it basically is saying anything that connects to the Wi-Fi. Because we have had some challenges with that, with people asking, well, what about my Kindle? That would count as a personal electronic communication device because it does connect to the Wi-Fi. And then probably one of the most important definitions is stored. So a lot of times we have rules where you can like put it in your pocket or keep it out of sight. This is saying that it has to either be into, but not limited to, student's backpack, a locker, a locked pouch, or a designated place in the classroom. So when they say stored, that's what they're talking about. So this is the word-for-word guidance out of the final guidance document for elementary for K-5, including the bolds, or the bolds from the guidance. That's not Jamie's bolds. So cell phones and personal electronic communication devices will not be used by elementary students within the school building or on school grounds. If a parent decides that an elementary school student should bring a cell phone or a personal electronic communication device to school, the device must be turned off and stored away from the student during the school day. School divisions must make policies that determine cell phone and personal electronic communication device while on school buses where elementary schools or students are present. Students must use school-based communication tools and platforms to communicate non-emergency needs with parents. So think back to our day when we would go to the office and have them call our mom if something was going on. Parents and educators should use school-based communication tools and channels to communicate emergencies and non-emergencies during bell-to-bell instructional time. And it says should because they can't dictate to parents how they're trying to communicate with the kids. And then it just basically says for off-site, any school-sponsored activity after school or any of that should be included in your policy. Middle school is very similar. It basically says that during the bell-to-bell school day, it's off. They must be stored and turned off, so that eliminates the airplane mode thing. Specifically for time periods outside of the bell-to-bell school day, school divisions must make local policies that determine the appropriate cell phone and personal electronic communication device by middle school students, including before and after school on buses within the school building and on school grounds. Students must use communication tools. That's no different than what we said for elementary. Parents should use communication devices, school-based communication devices. That's no different than the elementary. Educators and all co-curricular and extracurricular sponsors must use non-social media-based app for communication. So if you think about it now, if I'm the softball coach and I'm canceling softball, I may send a text to all my group or use Remind, hopefully not a text, unless you're texting everybody. This would require, like back in the old days when we got on the announcements and said, hey, by the way, softball practice is canceled this evening or whatever. And then schools should give middle school students developmentally appropriate guidance. So basically teaching kids how to use the phones appropriately when it's appropriate to use and when it's not.
So Dr. Salk, just real quick.
Yep.
So from K to 8, and correct me if I'm wrong, but we are bell to bell, right?
You are.
That we're not.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yep, you're bell to bell. Now,
Except for the stored piece.
except for the store piece, so they can have it like
On their person.
but just out of sight, right?
Okay.
And you deal with it when you see it out of sight. That's
Okay.
the only difference.
And in terms of the educators and all co-curricular and extracurricular sponsors must use non-social media based apps, you can use email.
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
so they're
Because
not
they would be able to
considering
access
Gmail
it.
an app, they're just.
Right, right.
We're
We're talking about don't send it through Remind, or don't send it through Game Changer, or don't send it
Send it
through.
through Snapchat.
Right, right. This says the same thing as the other. You have to come up with rules when kids are on field trips, whether you're gonna let them use it or not use it, or have it on their person or not have it on their person. So then here's the real, I guess, different from what we're currently doing. High school students shall not have a cell phone or personal electronic communication device during bell-to-bell school day. Remember, right now, we allow them to have it in the hallways and at lunches. If they are brought to school, they must be stored and off during the bell-to-bell school day, but remember their definition of stored. It couldn't be in their pocket or in their pocketbook, but it could be in their book, I guess, pocketbook, book bag, whatever. They may be used on a high school campus before and after school, and that makes sense. I mean, if you are playing a sport and you're staying there till 9 o'clock at night and you need to call your mom to come get you, I can remember as a ninth grader getting left a couple times, no offense, mama. During bell-to-bell instructional time, students must use school-based communication tools to get in touch with their parents. That's the same as the middle school and elementary school. Parents should use school-based communication tools and channels to communicate emergencies during bell-to-bell instructional time. Same things. Same thing with the co-curricular, extracurricular sponsors, that they must use a non-social media-based app. And then, once again, schools should give high school students developmentally appropriate guidance and support on the appropriate use of school-issued technology devices, educational apps, etc. This next one would be like if a kid's going to Burton, obviously, whatever school you're at, you follow the rule of the school that you're at, is all it's saying. So we'd have to decide, I mean, obviously the kids should be able to use their phone as they shouldn't use it in the car, but have the phone if they're traveling so that they can get in touch if something was to happen. And then same thing, establish procedures for off-site events, including field trips, transportation, daily bus transport, those kinds of things. So we've already covered these a little bit, but the exemptions, yes, they were addressed in the guidance that if a kid has an IEP, a 504, or a health plan, that information and the need for that device should definitely be considered. They do ask you to look for viable alternatives first before defaulting to the phone. EL students is a good example. If you're using a translator app on a phone, is there another device that could do that that's not phone-based? And then we would have to develop clear communication protocols that we share with families on family-related emergencies. So we can't have a school that doesn't answer the phone for an hour during lunch. We need to have somebody we shouldn't anyway, but we should have a designated times that the phone is covered to where if somebody calls and we're treating that family emergency the same way we would a school crisis, and we have somebody there working with the kid to communicate. So communication pathways that we would clearly communicate. I found this interesting in the guidance that adults in the school should lead by example and have clear boundaries on when they use their cell phone. Obviously, staff will sometimes have to use their cell phone. I mean, we've experienced it several times, unfortunately, in the last few weeks with Raptor, but we need to use our phones sometimes for that. So that's just basically saying model what you're preaching. Sorry. Same thing I said for family-based emergencies, family-based non-emergencies, school-based emergencies, how to communicate with families. We'd need a clear protocol. So the last thing in the guidelines is a conclusion, and it says school divisions are expected to review their existing policies and if necessary adopt and implement age-appropriate policies and procedures aligned with the guidance on bell-to-bell cell phone policies by January 1st of 2025. School divisions may adopt policies that are more comprehensive than the guidance. And then the last bullet was the VDOE and its partner agencies expect to conduct a review process at the end of 24-25 to measure the guidance impact and consider opportunities for refinement and improvement. And then the last slide I had in here is, this is kind of where I got all the information from because it's all straight off the VDOE website or out of the model guidance policies. So for example, I don't know if this is gonna work, so I hope it does, but if you click up on this, and it's not working.
It is.
It is working? Awesome. So this is, I don't see it, that's weird.
Oh.
So this is the cell phone free guidance. It gives a much more simplistic definition or explanation of what it is at elementary, middle, and high. It's got some videos on there of some school divisions that have already went bell to bell, and some testimonials from some kids. Franklin County video is up there, which would be the closest locality to us with a video. I'm not saying it's the closest locality that has the bell to bell, but it definitely is the closest with the videos. Then they also have a link, if I can get it to work, to all the research, what the research tells us. So this is kind of a summary of the research. And then the last one is basically what the bullets of what they learned when they went on all the tours of the listening. So that is pretty much a summary of what the new guidance says. Any questions?
I believe you have some statistics on.
Oh, yes, sir. Thank you very much. I forgot.
What,
So Dr. Nicely asked us, and I asked Tammy, I guess that's how it works, to find some discipline data of what the high schools have seen so far since we implemented our newest policy. So Cave Spring High School has had 54 students that had a first offense, and only 2 kids with a second offense, and nobody beyond a second offense. William Byrd has had 22 with their first offense and only 1 with a second offense.
That's good.
Hidden Valley High School has had 35 with their first, 5 with their second, and then you guys do have 1 renegade who's had 6 offenses.
Yonder.
Yeah. Glenver has had 35 with their first, 6 with their second, and only 2 with their third. Northside, you're the winner for firsts. You got 71 first offenses.
You're the winner.
17
Better
with-
policing.
There is a different way to look at that. 17 had a second offense and 2 had a third offense. And you are right. There are variabilities in this as far as people actually seeing it and people actually addressing it, right? I mean, we would hope everybody's doing it to policy, and if they're not, that's a us challenge. And then Burton has had 4 with their first, 2 with their second, 1 with their third, and 1 with their fourth. I would hope it's not the kid in building trade or something using table saw. That'd be my.
Yeah, something I'd be interested in seeing is a comparison of this time last year in terms of cell phones and discipline, like whatever that may be. Not just that you have it out, but some sort of discipline because of maybe it be, the bullying or the inappropriate pictures, those kinds of things that we do see from time to time. I would love to see where we're at.
Yeah, you can almost look to see if maybe there's a correlation, like if some of those incidents have actually improved.
Right.
We could say maybe this kind of helps with that. That might be some. It almost be hard to do an apples to apples comparison
hard
on
to compare.
that data versus last year because the structure was so much different. Unless you have a different thought about that.
I think we didn't have consensus across the schools. We didn't discipline the same. Some would do 3, someone would do 2. So that also will skew your data. But I'm pleasantly surprised with the data we have. I think it looks
I
pretty
think
good.
we could pull data though that had phone related, if they logged it in as a phone related
Through our Swiss
incident.
data, I think we could
We
find.
could
okay,
we could
good.
probably pull some of that to see if it's making a difference.
Let's reduce some of that. I mean, I know a lot of it happens at home and then funnels into the school.
Well,
the
yeah,
next
the
morning.
bullying and
Yeah.
stuff would be really hard because that could have been something they sent the night before and you're dealing with it because it's disrupted the school community, right?
Right.
But I can definitely, Tammy and I will work, in other words, Tammy will work to try to get you on that. I'm joking.
Thank you, Tammy.
There's probably some anecdotal captures that you can get from the principals locally, at the schools to see what their thoughts are. I wouldn't mind hearing that.
Yeah, and part of it, I mean, we definitely want to make sure that there's no question about being enforced
Yes.
in the classrooms, and so that's something we'll need to keep hammering away at and making sure that's not the case.
Yeah, that's
It's
good.
encouraging the small number of second offenses.
Yeah, regardless of how many first offenses you have, there are some dramatic drops to the second offense. And that is encouraging, right? Because that sends the message. They are taking this seriously and they're going to deal with it.
I think it's important too, like we were talking about before with newsletters when we send out, general mass communications, to just put a little blurb in there every time of some statistic or something about.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the safety of phones.
So do you know any divisions, I know there's probably a long list that have already implemented the guidance early on that haven't waited until January? And like, have they expressed any regrets or positive or any thoughts that you've heard?
Yeah, I mean,
You're super-
in our Region 6 meetings and I'm sure this will come up with our upcoming superintendent's conference coming up in a few weeks, statewide, but, and we discuss it, with our statewide meetings, because, I share Region 6, and so we always kind of hear from different divisions, but in a lot of divisions, had already gone here before all this state initiative too, so kind of keep that in mind. So, and some are doing it in response to this, but others had already gone down that road. I mean, just sort of anecdotally, haven't heard anybody come back and say, yeah, we've gone this route and gosh, we regret it, or it's caused a lot of problems. Anecdotally, the reports have been, yeah, it's been really a good thing.
They've gone bell to bell and then haven't had
That's
any
what
regrets.
people are kind of reporting so far.
Yeah, that's what I heard at Montgomery County. My nieces are there. And then I just have another question for you. Have you had any divisions report feelings of, and I think this was expressed, like the consequences that we're going to be giving our students, is it going to be that much of a burden on our staff? And we know our staff already do a lot. We don't want them to be burdened with more. Has there been an overwhelming report of staff feeling overtaxed by this responsibility with the consequences?
Yeah, and we'll definitely, if that becomes an issue, well, one way we'll kind of see that bubbling up is through our, when we have our employee advisory committee, because people can put in, questions or concerns and that kind of stuff. So that we'll probably see that bubbling up if that becomes one. I don't, you guys have seen the list so far. I don't know if that's come up so far. I don't think it has. Because really, I don't suspect that it will, just because, they're already supposed to be enforced in anyway. I think if nothing, the policy you guys already adopted just frankly gives them a lot more legs to stand on, where they can more confidently enforce it, at least during class time.
Yeah, they don't have to be the bad guy. They can say,
Right.
we have a policy that says you can't have it in instructional time. So they can't play mommy and poppy.
Right.
Yeah, but we put those consequences in place though, and there was concern like logging administratively and things like that, that was more consistent across the county. So I was wondering if anybody was complaining about
I have not heard
that.
anything from administrators about that. Have you?
About the
About the being overtaxed with having to log it all?
No, and they were really quick to get me that today, so it's, I think it's very useful, the way they're doing it. And actually, the feedback I got is I think they're pleasantly surprised. I think they thought it might be a little bit more difficult, but I think because the difference, because we had this policy in place last year, part of it, right?
Part of it, right.
And so just to make it a little bit more stringent and then taking it out of the teachers' hands, I think we have seen some positives. So just writing down the incidents, when I asked for it, Northside actually sent me the whole grid that they used. Very, very easy for them to gather their data from it.
When's the next secondary principals meeting, Mr. Riley? Is it coming up?
Middle of this month.
Okay. So we can ask folks ahead of time to, be sure to, collect some of that information so y'all can have that discussion. Right.
Yeah, and then, did we apply for some education grants?
Yes, ma'am. We submitted a $10,000 grant. I can't remember, it's called a micro something grant, but basically to fund at our elementary schools, continuing to educate parents through different meetings and such. Ms. Hughes, or Dr. Hughes, sorry, was part of that as well. So hopefully we'll get that, give us not a whole lot of money, but a little bit of money to develop some materials and pay some people for staying after and actually presenting those at the parent meetings.
Mr. Lynn?
And I know we value the input from the Student Advisory Council, and I'd like to hear what their take is on the current, what we've done currently at some point, maybe at our next meeting, if they could do that. And then also, I don't know if it's possible to get the statistics from our neighboring counties that have gone bell to bell. One of my concerns early on was it might lead to additional absenteeism, chronic absenteeism, if a student thought, oh, I can't have my cell phone in school. But maybe it's just the opposite. Maybe they're not being bullied, and so if we could check with those neighboring counties to see if their absenteeism rates have actually decreased because they're not worried about not having their phones.
Yeah, and I have my next region superintendent's meeting next Wednesday, so I'll ask folks if they could bring that data up to that meeting. That way we'll get it pretty quickly.
And it may be still too early to tell,
Yeah,
only 9
I'll
weeks in.
bring it up, yeah, okay.
We
Yeah.
meet also on Thursday with the Student Advisory Committee, and Mr. Martin's asked me to be there because they do have some questions about cell phone policies.
And I'll just say I did talk to somebody out of Montgomery County today or yesterday. And I was asking them because they went above and beyond Youngkin's thing, and I would never want to do that, but they're actually limiting it at after-school activities and things like that, which is a little bit much. But she said that overall, with education, they've had quite the successful implementation of their bell-to-bell, and that the engagement at their school has actually gone up. They're seeing kids talk to each other. They don't have their heads down and looking at their phones. Walking through the hallways, they're not looking down. They're interacting and talking with each other, which I think is really quite encouraging. So that's good. And she thought that their engagement was up at their after-school activities.
If you wouldn't mind, if you're talking to the SAC about the topic anyway, just maybe engage them in a conversation about how they see it enforced, and they'll be honest, at least from the classes they're in. Yeah, I want to make sure that's definitely not an issue.
Well, I had a couple parent phone calls, so I do think it's being enforced because they don't want their students to have actual attention.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I do think that Franklin County piece was good. That's on that website. It was, students were interviewed.
There was 3 students, I believe, that were part of their SAC that are giving feedback on the video, and basically they're saying that it's, I think the title of the news article was, it's different.
Yeah, yeah,
But they didn't have anything negative to say.
yeah. Thank you.
Item 3.04, preliminary 2023-2024 year-end results. Ms. Susan Peterson.
Good evening. Thank you for having me tonight so I can go over our preliminary results from the audit. Actually, our audit hasn't even started yet. Our auditors started in the county audit, but then they reserve our piece till we submit our annual school report to VDOE. And so I wanted to provide to you a preliminary look at where we landed for last year so you can see what kind of reserves we're going to be looking at rolling in December. We will be presenting the audit on November 14th. I will take the audit along with another item, the next item on the list, to the Board of Supervisors for their first reading on November 19th. And then on December 17th, I will take it for the second reading. So after the December 17th meeting, we will be able to use whatever reserves they appropriate for us. Okay, so taking a look at oh my gosh, I'm flipping through all over. The report in front of you, the left-hand side, we start talking about the general fund. At first, we have the revenues. We've got state revenues were down slightly. This is mostly due to a larger decrease in sales tax offset by a not as big increase in SOQ revenues. And so that those two are inversely related based on how VDOE sets our revenue. So that was not too bad of an impact. Our federal revenues went up by $98,000. This is mainly Medicaid money that comes in. We do budget for Medicaid. We just budget it very conservatively because it can change. Other revenues are, the largest chunk of this is interest. In the past several years, the interest rates were not very favorable to us, but this year we've accumulated a lot more interest. The county allocates that to we have pooled cash with the county, and they allocate us our portion. In addition, some of that is where we have recognized rent for the churches, but we do transfer that to the schools, but we do have to recognize the income. So overall, we had $772,997.28 of revenue surplus. Not a ton, but some. I won't beleaguer, but you can see the list of our department budgets and where each of the departments landed. So that gave us a $748,000 $687.95 departmental savings. And then when we looked at personnel, we had a $1.7 million savings. This is 1.1% of what we contracted for payroll for contracted personnel budget. So it was pretty tight. We like to see that stay around 2 million because you never know what's gonna pop up with needing to hire an aide that we didn't plan on hiring or a teacher that we didn't plan on hiring throughout the year. So at the end of the day, we have 3.2 million of general fund activity. We set up a carryover emergency contingency many years ago, and it's 2 million, and that just sits in our coffers. We roll it over every year. If we ever use it, we have to replenish it with the following year's budget. So our final carryover for the general fund is $5.2 million. According to our year-end policy that mirrors what the county has, we set aside the all encumbrances. So we have $427,680 of purchase orders that were in existence at year-end, and we roll those over and we carry that budget forward for our departments. So then the half of what is remaining outside of the emergency contingency goes to major capital, and then the remaining can go to minor capital. So the 1.39 million, 1.4 million of minor capital will be available to you for all these projects on Mr. Cagle's list if you choose to do them on December 17th. We have 13 other funds that, in accordance with the policy with the county, when the funds, revenue that they keep, they retain. So they just have carryover. The grant fund, you can see we've got 2.5 million of federal grants. The largest chunk of this is the IDEA grants. The next largest is our last little bit of the pandemic money, which has been spent and will be requested within a week, all of our funds from that. So that was about $888,000 left of this money, and almost $10 million, and several years later, we are glad to have used that in a good way to help all of our students through these past several years. State grants, the 4.2 million, the majority of that is going to be the all-in VA plan that came out to help with attendance and with the literacy plan. So we still have a good chunk of that to get us through. And then we have a few small local grants that will carry over. So in total, we've got almost 6.7 million in grants. Moving up to our minor capital fund first, we have minor capital projects that are unallocated. We've got 110,000 sitting in that. Now this does not marry up to what I reported earlier as being available from minor capital reserves, because we've got other revenues that come into minor capital fund that we can't use until we allocate it. So that's what that difference is. We have 444,000 approximately of minor capital projects that are in progress currently. And then we have 87,000 set aside in CMP projects that are unallocated, 403,000 for in progress CMP projects. And the next amount, 18,500. If you recall, back when the pandemic hit, we purchased a storage, mobile storage pod for all the schools to store so that we could make space for students to come in and be a part. We have been selling those over the past couple of years. They were originally bought with CARES money. And since they were originally bought with CARES money, we have to use the proceeds for something related. And so we've set those aside for preventive maintenance to get filters and stuff for the HVAC, because that's very closely related to the pandemic. We probably will get that spent this year. We've got the 3 turf replacement amounts sitting there. We've got music uniforms and vending grants. I will say the vending grants, once the 43,000 is spent, we are no longer receiving grants from the vending company. So that will go away. It will not be replenished. And the last item on here, Mr. Terry brought forth near year end, a request to approve the video security equipment grant. This is kind of below the fund balance because we used contingency reserves to cover it. We had 200,000 in there, but there's been no activity. All the revenue will be received in 25 and all the spending will occur in 25, but it will all occur before December. So that leaves us with a carryover in the minor capital fund of almost 1.9 million. And major capital projects, we've got $256,111.29. The majority of this relates to interest that the county provided to us off of bonds that we had for Cave Spring High School. Once, when they get a bond, that money sits in an account and earns interest. If we meet all of our drawdown requirements, then we're allowed to retain that, and the county will send us the interest on it. And so that's where, and we always put it into major capital so that it will go back into another major capital project. And then you can see the amount in the major capital fund set aside for our 3 projects. We have a little bit sitting in there for William Byrd High HVAC. And then at some point, we've already converted our HR system to global HR. The county is going to convert the payroll system to global payroll in the near future, and that is an amount we set aside several years ago to help fund that. So in major projects, we've got 5.2 million. Then we get into the bond projects, and you can see how much we have set aside. Keep in mind, all of this is just what was accumulated through this year. These amounts will go up because our final funding for all of these projects did occur in 25. And then our remaining balances, you can see each of the funds. I won't beleaguer this, but in total, we've got 60.1 million of carryover funds to carry over next year. Any thoughts, questions?
I noticed we haven't added turf replacement funding for our 4th turf field yet. Should we be doing that?
We will have discussions during the budget season with the county because we fund those. We have an MOU with the county, and they give us 75,000 per the last MOU, 25 for each field, and then we put in 25 for each field. So there's 50,000 going into each field from both sides. So we'll have to have a discussion with the county to add that first field on there.
Thank you, Susan. Item 3.05, request to appropriate the proceeds from the sale of Pogue Farm.
All right, let me see if I can get this a little bit bigger. After a long process, we have finally sold and received the funds for Pogue's Farm. We did use money out of major capital to purchase Pogue's Farm. So I do think it prudent for us to put the funds back into major capital. I also took a look at where we are with our 3 projects that Skansk is managing for us, and personally, I would feel more comfortable if we went ahead and set aside additional funds to increase the contingency. They have a contingency of 1.38% in the project, and just having been through these projects a couple of times, I would just feel my conservative self more comfortable if we went ahead and set this aside as part of the RCCTC contingency to be used as a last resort after everything else is done. And then if we don't need it, then we can put it back to do some of the other great projects that we need to do. So that's just my recommendation if y'all want to do that. And we can take that. We do have to take it to the county to have them approve it.
So they haven't approved for those proceeds to come back to the schools?
They will have
I
to.
initiated that process with the county administrator, and they asked for the closing documents and so forth. So they have that. In terms of process, I don't know if we talked about this. They wanted the school board to take the action first, then we take it to them.
Yes, the process is no different than when I bring the budget to you. We approve the budget first and how we're going to spend it, and then we take it to the county and they approve it, adopt it, and then do the ordinance.
Makes sense?
This will be on consent at the next meeting then.
All right. Item 3.06, request to transfer budget funds for fundraising campaign consulting.
So as you know, last year, near the end of the year, Mr. Sir and Mr. York engaged in a procurement process to hire a fundraising consultant to help raise much-needed funds for future campaigns to ensure that the programs we put at RCCTC have a steady stream of income going forward. We had identified some money at the end of last year to put towards this, but unfortunately, the procurement did not complete until after year end, so they were unable to set up a purchase order with a vendor because we didn't have one at the time. I have taken a look at our payroll projection at this point, and we do have enough in payroll lapse right now that we can cover this, and so I just, it is our policy to ask board for approval to move funds between departments greater than 50,000. And so since this is a invoice that's 54,000, I would like permission to move the funds from HR over to the CTE department for this
And
invoice.
this is what Mr. York was talking about, correct? And hiring the company to come in and do the rate.
Yes.
Okay.
Right, and just in terms of a procedural note, when we had that discussion, that was, we had to then go through the procurement process and so forth, but Showtime, the original plan was to, because you all were in favor and, affirmed the plan, but the original plan was to have all that process in terms of procurement done before year end actually happened, which took longer than, hoped. And so this is just kind of went a way of circling back around and having to approve it in a different way because now it's.
I know Mr. York's been doing some work. It might be a good idea for him to come in and kind of give us an update on where he's at too, with what he's been doing.
Right. I don't know if you want to say anything about that. I know you've been working with.
Yeah, we're doing a lot of behind-the-scenes work. Mr. York's working with Kinetic, that's the name of the company, and doing a lot of background work, getting the case statement built in collaboration with the company. We've been on several meetings with them already, and but yeah.
Have they given us any like projections as to what they? I mean, is there a goal set here as to an amount?
That's what we're building. And I think we can bring Mr. York in, and we can.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just saying, I understand the company wants 54,000. I mean, that's an initial investment that we're going to put in. I would like to know what they're thinking based off of our size community, their expertise. What would be a good goal? What would be a good number that we're going to get in the end?
Right.
Well, I'll circle back around and give you an update.
I think that would be good. I mean, what do you guys think? I mean, you want to hear that before you move forward with it? You want to hear from Mr. York and kind of see where we're at, and you guys good with that?
Are you saying before you actually approve?
I mean, I would
the
like to
funds?
know because it's been a while since they've.
Okay.
I mean, it's been a while since they presented to us.
We
I
could
don't
do it as
remember
instead of consent, we could do it as an action item.
Okay.
Could they present at the next meeting and we could make an action item if, is there a way to do that?
We can. Now, my only caution would be, I mean, basically, correct me if I'm wrong, back when we presented this, you all approved to move forward. All we're doing now is saying, hey, we're in terms of the actual, how the funding is done, we're doing it a different way. I would want to give the impression, in other words, that we're questioning whether or not we're going to move forward with actually paying them or not, because we've already kind of.
We've already
moved
that doesn't-
forward.
You mean we can't go back
The
on
train's
that?
left the station.
Okay, all right.
It's still get an update
I don't
from
think-
them.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I
At
would
this
like-
point,
Yeah, I don't
we're
think
already-
that's
we're already
the
in
issue.
we're already doing this. Is
I
what
think
you're
we're
saying.
good with the funding.
Okay, I mean, and that's the thing. I mean, it's been so long since we've talked about it. I
Sure.
don't-
We definitely give an update and a report.
Then we could just do an information item instead of, yeah.
All right,
Good.
sounds good.
So can this be consent next time? Just so we can move
We've
on.
got to pay him. We're locked in.
Would you envision wanting him to come into a work session and kind of give a
That's fine.
report, or at a
That's
regular
fine.
meeting, or?
Works. All
Okay.
right, is anyone anything else? Meeting adjourned.